let's start. Welcome everyone. Welcome to another episode of Tsuriou Squid Fishing Masterclass. Today I'll be teaching you about float and Paternoster rig squid fishing. So this method for float, our team personally do not use it often. This is more relaxed way of squid fishing. So this method requires an element of luck. So to us it's more of a cast and pray, but you can increase your luck with a few of the techniques, such as like the bait presentation, your float and your line. So this is the thing that we'll cover for today. So if you want something that is more different to what your traditional AE style fishing, so this will be one of them that you can utilize. But please be respectful with others as well, because a lot of times people use this method, they tend to have maximize their rod. So they have a lot of rods, so they use 4 rods. But if the pier is packed, please be respectful and do not just hog the whole pier with all your floats around. So just use what is required. So that's one thing that we will try to emphasize, because a lot of time people tend to use this method and they hog the whole pier, which is unfair to other people. So this is one thing that we would like to hope that our people will learn this technique, but do not use it in the wrong way. Okay, let's start. So the equipment that we need is have a few things. So we need to start with float stopper. Just give me a second. So the first part we need is a float stopper. Sorry, just give me a second. Sorry, just let me grab a some. Sorry about that. So I'll just come back to it. So we'll start again. So the first thing we need is a float stopper. There's a few different float stopper in the market, so you can actually see what suits you. So there's float stopper where there's only a little round circle. That's to stop the float from hitting, going over the line. Then these are the more traditional float stopper, where you actually slide through the line in there and you just use a stopper to plug it in. Then you have this more Korean and Japanese style float stopper, where there's front and back, so you actually like that. So float stopper, you can decide what sort of float stopper that suits your needs. For us personally, we will use a simple one, so we use different methods, so depending what we are fishing. So when we're fishing for fish, we use another type of float stopper, but for this method we can use whichever float stopper that is convenient for you. Like this sort of float stopper, which is bigger, so which will stop the float much easier. So firstly, you need a float stopper. That's a crucial part of it. For us, we usually tend to use something like that. It comes in a bunch of 5. So we just slide the line through and we just pull it, and the float stopper will stuck there. So this is one of them that we use often. So this is pretty much the float stopper we use. Then when we come to float, there's a lot of different kind of float in the market as well, so it's up to you to choose what is best for you. But for float, you have to learn to understand the weight, because they have a different rating as well. So different sizes of weight of the float. So you need the float that actually can compensate for the weight of the baited jig spike. So that because with a baited hook spike, it will be much more heavier. So if your float is not strong enough to hold the float, to float it up, you will sink. So when you sink, you will not be effective. So you need one that is actually balanced up, that you will float the jig, but it does not sink as well. And also it's not that too strong the float that when the squid pull, you do not feel the sensors. So very important that you need a float to balance up the weight of the jig. So this is a crucial thing. And also type of float. So for us, for this method, we tend to use through the float. So it comes directly through the middle and come out from the other end. And some other float, we have this type of float, where the line goes through it, and actually the float will hang up like that, and the line will come down like that, so you're like an L shape, so your rod line will come from this way, you'll go down that way. So this one will hang like that, and your jig will like that. It will hang like this. So these are the L-shaped ones. So you tend to need it like that. But for us, for this one, we want to increase the sensitivity, the effectiveness of the touch of the squid. We tend to use this type of float. That way you line directly through it. So when you cast it out, the jig will be straight away at the bottom. So when the squid pull, you'll go down like that. Because this one, you'll come down all the way L-shaped, so the sensitivity might not be as effective because it's not direct. So we tend to advise that you use the true float for this method. For this one, you can use for other fishing, for mackerel fishing and other stuff. So for the squid, we tend to advise to use that. But you can use this method as well if you want to use with a squid jig, because you can use either one if you're using squid jig with a float. So it doesn't matter with a squid jig, but for a spike, you tend to want to use a bigger one that is direct, so that when the squid pull, you'll see it. Okay, rod. So for rod, you need a strong rod that you can cast a baited jig out. Because if your rod is not strong enough, it will be too heavy. Because for a squid jig, it tends to be lighter. So do not use your normal squid rod that is more sensitive to cast out a baited jig, because you might break the rod, or it will be too heavy and your rod will be constantly bouncing at the front, that you do not feel the squid pulling when they're tagging the end of the float, the spike jig. So use a rod that is more stronger. Don't use your normal traditional squid rod, you'll tend to snap it, or as well as not so sensitive. So this is a key point to remember. So that is important. Okay, so swivel clips. So we have Lumo beads as well. Lumo beads is optional. So this is to put after your float to give it a cushion between your float and the clips. Depending on how you want to set it up, I'll explain it later. You can have without the Lumo beads, but have another stopper right at the bottom of the float, or you can have a Lumo beads that let the whole float come all the way to the bottom when you cast it out. So it's an option for two ways to do it. So for Lumo beads, it's optional, and I'll show you how you set it up as well. So you need swivel clips. This is to clip from the end of the line to your spike as well for the baited jig. So for the bait, then after that you need the bait itself. So that's the big debate between a lot of people. They always say that which is the right way to put the fish, to bait or to rig up your bait. Some say that's the head down, and some say the head up. So first of all, we would like to say there's no right or wrong method. So it's only what is the most effective and what you feel most comfortable with. So we explain the difference. So the packaging you can see, they have this the head facing down, and recently I posted one in our community page where there's one person that says that that's not the right way, you have to put it up this way. So there's no right or wrong. So it's more which method is more effective in situation that you see fit. Like we always say, fish effectively based on the understanding of the condition, so that you can fish effectively. So you can see the packaging shows the head down. I'll open it up and I'll explain both method and the pros and cons for the both method. So, alright. So we talk the more traditional method, which is what everyone mostly use, the head down, where the head facing the spike. So for this method, it's more effective, normal use, because the jig, we are not fishing like a squid jig. Squid jig, we cast it out and we'll pop it in. So we're fishing horizontally. So for a float, we do not fish horizontally. We cast it out, we fish it vertically. So when it's vertically, it's a different method. So we do not target the squid behavior, because remember we say squid have a few type of attacking method. They tend to like to attack the fish by the head and grab it into their mouth. So they tend to ambush and pull it into their mouth. But when the prey is much bigger in size and the squid are much smaller, Sometimes they do not use this method because when the squid is too strong, the bait is too strong, the fish dart it off, they might break that two tentacle. So they tend to use coming from the side and grab the fish from the side, they attack from the side. So that's when the side, then we strike. So with this method, when you're fishing, floating it down this way, and the head is directly facing the squid, so when they're coming up, at times they'll see, okay, this is an easy prey. They'll just grab it with the tentacle, the head, but they're grabbing from the front now, not from the back. So we do have videos that squid coming from the front, but those coming from the front, pretty much using a squid jig, you will not catch it. But for this method, you can still catch it because they come in from the front, they grab it, they think it's an easy prey, and they got hooked. So, but it's not the main method that we try to attract squid with to attack the head. For this one, because what we use bait, the bait tend to be bigger in size compared to a squid jig. So it's more intimidating compared to a squid jig. So when we hang it out like that, they tend to come from the side and grab it. And when they grab it, they'll drag it on the side. So because we are fishing vertically, so when a squid is fishing vertically, they will drag the spike to the side. When they drag to the spike, what happens? They will tend to move this way and they get hooked. So the hook rate will get more on the side. So usually the head is not to attract them to attack the head. It's because that we are fishing vertically, and the bait presentation is much bigger, present to them, so they tend to come from the side, grab it, when they pull, and they hook like that, and they get hooked. So this is the why that we usually say have the fish head at the bottom. It's not because we try to mimic a squid jig. So for the other guy that was talking in regards to using the other method, this way up is a logically what we do. The squid spike is at the bottom here. The squid jig, the spike is at the bottom. So we should mimic this when we're using the squid spike. No, why? Because we are fishing vertically, we are not fishing horizontally, because we are attracting squid this way and the squid come this way. But if this one is going vertically, it does not do the effect of what the squid jig is doing. So what we're going to do, so it's not the wrong method. You can still use this way up, but this way up, we'll say that when the current is moving, when the wind is strong, so when we're fishing vertically, so when we start to drift, the bait start to drift, it looks presented like that. So when the current is strong, this is a more effective way to use the head up instead of head down, because you'll drag this way. So when the squid come, they'll see and they'll grab, attack it like a normal squid jig. They'll come, they'll grab the head and they pull it in. So that is why it's not a right or wrong method, it's which way is more effective. One, I will say that it's more calm when the water is not moving much, so that when the squid pull this way, you still feel it down. When they pull this way, but when they pull this way, do note that your float might not go down. So you actually start floating as well. With a float, the tension is much stronger compared to squid jig. Because squid jig, when they is pretty weak, it's small. So when the line they pull, the line is going out as well. So you can still feel it on the tip and stuff. But a float acts as a really strong tension there. So when they pull, you might not feel it. So that's why you need a really sensitive float that actually balance out. So when they pull, you can see it goes down. And also, sometimes it does not goes down, but you see your float is weird. It's moving left or moving right. It means that the squid is pulling from the side and moving it. So when you see that, strike the squid rod and start reeling in. So this method up is not wrong, but the pros of this method is that during current, it will present like a natural way. But if you're using this way, with the head up, when the current is moving, you must say that this method might not be so effective, because there is they have the gills of the fish might give a tension resistance towards the water. So when the water is coming this way, the gills might stop it, to not make it flow naturally. But this is just minimal, will be a minimal effect because you're wrapping it with this big tray. So either method is fine with big presentation. So do not, you'll see a lot of always debate like which is the right way, which is the wrong way. There's no right or wrong way. You can bait whichever way you like. But personally, the normal way is that having the squid jig, the head down, is because we're fishing vertically, not horizontally. Alright. now we have the bait, now we have that, you need to get the bait tray. So a lot of snapper fishermen will know that we tend to get that, so when we wrap our bait, when we put our bait on the hook, we tend to wrap a few times, so that when we cast it out, it does not, we do not lose the bait. So this says ideal for surf, rock and squid fishing at the bottom. You can see the word. But personally, I do not like this one because this is a bit thick. So I tend to try to get those that is more thinner and more translucent. So this one is a bit thick. So what you do is, when you get your bait, spike it through the mouth and go it through the body and come out like that. Then once you've done that, just wrap it up. Go around so that your bait holds up, so that it does not go off. So this is one of the things that you really need when you're using a spike to fish. So the bait wrap is crucial to keep your bait there. So also it's important to read your float as well to see when it comes down or moving sideways. So that is the way to help you detect the squid is touching. So okay, now we will set up the sample to show you. Alright. For line, there's one crucial secret with the line. Do not use braided line when you're using a float method. Use monofilament. That's where monofilament come in play. Because for braided line, once it gets wet, it's not slippery. So you tend to have your float stuck and do not go all the way up to the float stopper. So do not use braided line. Always use monofilament when you're fishing with float. That's one important key aspect that you need to remember. So for line, you don't need to use expensive line. Just use as light as possible the line, but strong enough to carry the weight of the baited jig. So that's a crucial part. And just remember to use monofilament. That's one time that I would say that don't use a braided line, because this is crucial to have the slippery, smooth material on the line. And for reel, just use any reel. A ship reel will do, because you're not really doing any aiding or anything. So pretty much you just want that is enough to cast it out and just wait and just reel it in. That's it. So an old reel will be fine. So what I would do is, I grab one of that, I put it through the end, and I pull it. Then I got one float stopper there. Because I'm using a bigger float, so the hole is pretty big, and you'll still go through my float stopper. So I would need to get an additional float stopper. It's a round kind of thing. It's pretty small, so it's a round thing, so that I just have to go through it. So once you have it through, I'll have like this, something like a T. Alternately, I can put a big float stopper like that in the front, big stopper on the front, or I can use that. So once I have that, I can use my float. So the first step is to put a float stopper in, followed by a float. So now my float is stopped wherever I have my stopper is. So I can do how far I want to. I can just adjust the float stopper up and down to determine how deep I would like to go. So next is optional. Like I say, you can have another stopper right at the bottom here, so that your float is stationary at the top bit. But if you want to have it at the bottom, you can go all the way up to the bottom. That way you use a float, use a fluoro bead. So for me, I'll teach you the other method, so that we don't have the float stopper at the back. So what we do is, get a fluoro bead. What's the purpose of a fluoro bead? Fluoro bead is to cushion the float from constantly hitting the knot of the clip, so that you'll constantly damage the clip and it will come off. So what we do is we use the float stopper as a cushion. So once you have the float stopper, once you have the bead the loom will be at the bottom. You'll act like that, act like a cushion right at the bottom. Once you've done that, you can add a clip. So clip you can use with a blood knot, or for me I like to use a uni knot. You can use whatever knot that you seem fit. So you have to see the monofilament. Just do it two loops. Right. Just snip the pin off. Alright. So now it's all set up. So the float will come up here and you'll stop right here. So that's the depth I want. Then you have the loom will be at the bottom. So that's to cushion the float from hitting the knot at the end. So once we have that, put the spark on. So the float method is all set up. So like I mentioned earlier, you can, for this method it's easier to cast because your float is all the way down. And try to get, because you're fishing deeper waters, you would like to tend to get a float stopper that's smaller that you can go through the guide. So when you go through the guide, like this one, I can go through the guide, I can wind it in further before I cast it out. So the float stopper can go into the guide and cast it out. So that way you can cast further. So for one thing to improve your luck, or as I say, effectiveness, there's a few things you can do. First, bait presentation. So you have to present your bait to look more like a bait fish. So when you tie the wrap and stuff, don't try to squish it out or mushy and stuff. Try to make it, to keep it as intact as possible, the bait, the pilchard or King George whiting or anything, or green grass whiting. So try to keep it more presentable, looks more like an actual bait itself. Then this is one, to increase your catch rate. Two is the float. Use a float that you can balance up, because if it's too strong, it does not feel the squid pulling. A lot of times the squid already rip off their own tentacle, or they have escaped and you still haven't realized that you've got a squid. So float method is very important, that you have a float that's actually just well balanced, so when they pull, you can actually feel that your float is going down, so that you know that squid is caught, so that you will actually wind it in. Because a lot of times that people using the float, they don't realize that they already lose the fish or the squid. Then pretty much you catch nothing. You're sitting the whole day waiting, and you catch nothing. So it's important to improve your catch rate with the float. So these are the effective method because to us this method is a cast and pray. You just cast it out and you just pray that there's a squid come, because you don't need to use any technique or anything much. So it's how to improve is to improve your bait presentation, the float, the line. The line is crucial to use so that the float can slide up and down easily. Because if you're using a braided line, the line once it's wet, it's like a cloth, so it actually pretty much it does not slide. So you need to use that. And finally, the most important part is know the depth of the area that you're fishing. So if you're fishing 3 or 4 meters, you have to move the float stopper up higher to give it. Let's say you're fishing 3 meters of water, you want this to be about 2.5 meters. So that's close to where the bottom of the sea bait, where the squid is, so that when they swim around and when you ambush, they see your bait. If you put it too high up, they may not see it, and because it's not in the strike zone, but you might be lucky that the squid will swim past in the mid waters and see it, but they tend to be at the bottom of the sea bait. So this method, you want to get it as close to the bottom as possible. So even if you have this set up, you can swap it up. Float method you can use 2 ways. One with the spike, and the other method is to just use a squid jig. So this is our snake squid jig. Look how good it is. So we're having a promotion now. If you spend 150, you get this for free. So what you do is you can use it the same method as the squid spike. You set up exactly the same way. That's what you will set up for the spike. But the only thing is that you want to change out the float. This float is too heavy for the jig. So as mentioned, when the squid attacks, you will not feel it. So change to a small float, such as the size like that, the small one, that will balance out the weight. So they have like different sizes, 0.5, 2B, 1B, and all this stuff. So the float have a float rating system. So you want to get one that actually is balanced out. So this method. This one is really good if you're in the land-based or boat. You have a slipper rod or kayak. So a lot of people tend to, this is the lazy style. So they have one like that. They just cast it out on the side while they're doing their ailing. So when they catch the first one ailing, when the squid come, they see this and they will attack it, because this is the follower, actually the second squid that you have not chance to catch it because you're still on the first one. So they will go after the second one. So this is a good slipper rod method for both kayak as well as land-based. You just put another rod on the side and just leave it there. And because you will stay floated, and because this was suspended, then the jig will be floating around just waiting for squid. Also, if you have a kid or anything that is new to fishing, you can use this method for them. And this method is actually sometimes can be really annoying for ailing fishermen. So because that what I mean by annoying is that I'm doing ailing, someone is using this method next to me. So they are not, if they're new, but they are not doing ailing. They're using this method to cast it out and also wind it in. So when they wind it in, they wind it very slow because they want because if you wind it too fast, so this is the depth. If you wind it too fast, you'll come up to mid-water. So for them, they'll be winding very slowly. So if you have a kid, give them a rod like that, set it up for them, cast it out for them, and they can wind it up slowly, because as they wind it up slowly, it does not affect the sink rate, so you just do it at the bottom. So when you're doing ailing, for me, I'm doing ailing, so aggressive method. So I'm doing bang, 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 the squid get excited, they see my jig, so my initial jig. So they see okay, let's say this is the jig. So I'm doing ailing. So the squid saw it, they start chasing my jig. But because I didn't realize there was a squid following my jig, so I was doing my ailing, because ailing is coming very fast, and I already removed it. So what happened? They have nothing to attack, they back off. So when they back off, someone with a float method, slowly wind it in, very subtle method, they see, oh, this must be the one I saw earlier. Easy bait, they attack it. Because we have ones that an older guy followed us to fish, and he was new, so we set this up for him. He actually outfished my friend with using an ailing method. So because my friend was doing our ailing method, the squid is all following, and at the end, we back off and attack the jig that is more subtle. So for this method, you can do it for kids. So because they can just cast it out, they just wind slowly. So when you're doing ailing, you're enticing the squid school to come towards your jig. But by the time you take it out, they see this jig is still around and they'll attack it. So we also have experienced that people put it just there, the slipper rod, while we're doing ailing. So by the time the squid follow, our jig is already too shallow that we can't let it sink down because of why we're doing ailing. So we take our jig up, we're going to recast it, but the squid already saw this jig, they came for it and attack the float jig. So this method is good, you can have it on the side just as a slipper rod, and you also can help kids or people that's new to squid fishing. This method, they can cast it out and just slowly wind it in. You don't need to do much. As long as you have to understand the depth of the water and adjust the stopper to allow the squid jig to go down to the depth. So this is a good method for kids to use for fishing. And like I said, it can be really bad for ailing people because they end up stealing your catch because they will just back off and go towards it. And because this is a more subtle, as compared to when you're doing ailing, it's more aggressive. So that is that for float fishing. So the next one I'll teach you is Paternoster rig. Okay. Paternoster rig, depending on the species of the squid. In Australia, our squid does not school like in part of Asia and in part of US as well as in part of UK. So for them, they have the loligo squid. The loligo squid tend to come in deep water, they come in big school at night. So when you shine the big lights on it, the halogen lights and stuff, the commercial squid fishermen tend to shine. Then they bring in the plankton and the bait fish, and all the school will start coming. So with that, the Loligo squid become a big school because so that they're competing for food. So whenever they see the food source, they tend to attack it. So it's important to understand that this method for Australian squid or southern calamari or tiger squid and stuff is not as effective, but it actually works in certain areas. So this method is good if you want to cast distance as well. When the squid is in deeper waters, you want to start your casting distance in land base, you can use this method to try to get the distance. It will still work, but it's not as effective as a AB method. So I'll teach you the method. For Victoria, if you're in Mornington, here, this is a very good method for that. Because why? Because the squid there tend to be small squid. All the spawns usually tend to congregate there in the large school. So this method is more subtle because you just do a basic lift and stuff. So this is a good method to utilize if you're in certain areas of Victoria or part of, depending on which period you're fishing. So you have to understand the area, the squid in the area, so then you can use it. So for Paternoster rig, it's pretty simple. I'll show you with the rope later to tie it. So what you want to do is, what you need is pretty simple. This one, for this method, you need to use braided line, like your normal squid jig, squid rod with your braided line, the usual one. Then you need your leader, so you use your leader line to do this. So you want a swivel, then after that you want a squid jig, and you want to do a sinker. Sinker, we just advise to use the smallest one you can because you do not need it to the jig to sink too fast to the bottom. You want it, give it time to slowly sink down as well. So if you use too big of a sinker, you just bang right to the bottom and it just stays there. Because for squid fishing, is when the drop is where the squid attack. So we tend to use just a tiny squid, a sinker at the bottom. So how do you tie your Paternoster rig? So I'll teach you the method. Before I do so, look at that detail of our Luna squid jig. This is a unicorn. So if you have a lady fishing with you or anything, this jig is a killer jig and it's very effective, and the pattern of it is very amazing. So this will suit the lady. And that's a white glow jig, so you will work day and night, and night you will be glowing in the dark to attract the squid glow vision, and in the morning you absorb the UV light and it will become a UV charge, create a UV silhouette. So first thing first, let's think of this. We'll start from the bottom. So we do a loop for the sinker first. So it's pretty simple, just like that. Just do a loop. You can just, I just make it longer so you can see it much easier. So you can just do a loop. You can either go through once or go through twice. So I just go through once and pull it like that. That's it. You just need that for the sinker. Then once you've done that, you can either do one loop or two loops depending on your state and your regulation of your fishery. So do check it out. Some states like Victoria allow 2 squid jigs because 1 squid jig is considered as 1 hook. We allow 2 hooks in 1 line, so baited line. So this is considered as one baited hook with 1 jig. So we allow 2. So we can do 2. So the most simple one, if you're still new to doing loops and stuff, you don't have to do a fancy one for this method. You can just do a round circle. You can either go through once or you go through twice. So if you go through twice, you just pull like that. That's it. But sometimes if you just do that, when you pull, when you're new, you actually become not a loop. You just reopen up the whole thing. The line becomes straight. But this is the simplest. And you just cut it off at the end and just tie a swivel at the end. So this is the way. But if you want it to be more fancy and effective, you can, well, not effective, but more presentable. So you can open up like that. Just spin a few rounds. This you can just look online because there's a lot of Paternoster rig stuff, and just put it through. And this will create a T shape, so that like that. So you create a T shape. So this will be more presentable in a way that the jig will be not just hanging down like that. So it will just become more straight. So this is the Paternoster rig style. for Paternoster rig style, I said do 2. Let's want to do 2. Okay, same thing. Do a loop. I just go through once. That's it. I can just do like that. You can see the two difference. One with a T shape and the other one is not, so that it's more droopy. So for us, we actually use this one without the T shape. Back then when we used to use a lot of this method, but now we don't really use, but it's optional. So you can just do whichever way. But try not to do it too big, too long, because just try to, as long as your squid jig can go through it. So once you have that, you just put your squid jig through it, and you just thread it through. So how I do it is, same with your swivel. So you try to, don't do it too big. Have a look. I messed it up. Yeah. So this is my loop. I just thread it in. So once you thread it in, don't make it look too big, and your jig can go through the knot. You pull it through the hole, and you pull it back to the knot, and like that. So that's done. So this is the method to get your jig. But there's a secret to this. Sorry, just got a pop-up message. So the secret is use slow sinking jig, or modify your jig by cutting part of your sinker off. Because for this method, what happens, you see, if you do it like that, it's too heavy, so the jig is going this way. So when you come down, you'll be like that. But with the water, the weight can start the current, you'll still be floating a bit like that. But if you use the slow sinking jigs that we have, like 2.5S or 3.5S, the slow sinking one. Slow sinking one, the angle tends to be like that, so it will tend to be floating this way. So you still give a bit of angle, but you still in a way that is more subtle. So the key is to use a slow sinking jig and a smaller jig as well, because this method is quite subtle. So use the small jig that you can. In Europe and other countries, they tend to have the weightless jig, so it's like a bullet. So other brands has it and stuff, like one of the European brand has it in Australia, but they don't seem to be doing well, because why? The squid species is totally different. So the weightless jig is like a bullet, so it's just like without a weight here, so it's just a bullet. So because their squid species is different, so they tend to be using that method more often. So this method, Paternoster rig, is very effective in UK and in US as well. So and part of Asia like Malaysia and stuff. So that's where the squid species is different. So this is a good method to use. So what is the method? Once you set it up, it's different to egging. Do not do egging bang 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 stuff. So what you do is, I'll just remove that so that it looks easier. It's a bit heavy now. So treat this as the sinker. So once I cast it out, let it sink to the bottom. Once it's at the bottom, I just do a light lift a bit up the sinker, and I just let go and let it go down. So a lot of time I'm just fishing a vertical area, and I do not wind it in. So I just keep lifting up and down, so we actually do not cast far. So that's when when you pier, the squid tend to come near close to the pier. So we just cut about 2 or 3 meters, and we just constantly just lift up a bit, and slowly wind it in, and just bring it in a bit by bit if you want to. So initially you have to just cast it out and just do a lift. Sometimes you just cast a meter out and just do a simple lift. Let it sink down, wait a bit, do a simple lift, wait it down, let it sink. Because this method will let the squid jig is very subtle and floating, so the smaller squid tend to come to attack it. Yeah. So this method does help in certain pier, but not everywhere. So what you can do as well is, like for winter, one of my friends loves to use this method, this Paternoster method, because it's out of casting distance. So we're fishing on the rocks, and the squid, because the water is a bit too cold, so they tend to move to a deeper water that's out of land-based casting distance. So that is the water column is more consistent with the water temperature. So we need to use cast out the distance. So what we do, a jig, to cast out further our casting distance, what we can do in land-based is use a longer rod, the line that is much thinner, and also a heavier jig, a 3.5 jig. But if that doesn't work, you need even further distance than what we have done, but still doesn't work, then you add a Paternoster rig like that. Because with a weight here, you can naturally cast way further than the squid jig weight can do. So once you cast it out, you still slowly wind it in, like and then or slowly. But the downside with this method is, if you try to do similar to 80, you cast it out and you do a hop, and let it go down, hop, let it go down, but you're doing in a diagonal angle. So when you're dragging on down the seafloor, this method will get you snagged a lot. So a lot of times you tend to lose a lot of your sinker, and if you're unlucky, the sinker does not break off, and end up the whole rig break off from the swivel here, and end up you lose the whole rig. So for this method, I personally find it very annoying because you're constantly losing your sinker and stuff just to try to get further casting distance, but you're constantly snagging on rocks or standing on the weed bait. So I would, because we're fishing at the bottom near the sea bait, because remember, squid is at the bottom, so you want to drag along the sea bait. So when you drag this on the sea bait, what will happen? You snag on the weed and snag on the rocks. Different to snapper. Snapper will wind in very fast, so this thing will start floating up. The sinker will start floating up very fast. But for squid fishing, it's different. So you constantly try to drag at the bottom to get this jig close to the bottom. So with that, doing that, the downside is that you constantly will be losing sinker. So some people will just pre-rig, so you can just tie the whole setup ready. So with the sinker on and all these things, a few spare ones. So once it breaks off, you can just retie the end of your red line to the swivel, and it's all set up ready to go. So this is a method that I personally think in Victorian waters, in Australian waters, is depending on which pier you're fishing and what sort of squid is around. So they tend to do more target for smaller squid, and also for if you want to cast a distance. For medium squid, the large squid, they do attack as well, but for me personally, I find it's a bit boring as well. You constantly just lifting, drop it, lifting, drop it. So, but with a small squid, this method is very subtle, so you can catch a lot of them in a short time. So this is one of the methods that you can use. So for float I would personally suggest to use it only if you want a relaxed method of fishing, because like this method is pretty much cast and pray. You cast it out. You only have control on reading your float to increase your effectiveness, the control on the line, control of the depth, and control of the bait presentation. So this is the thing you have in control. But for egging is different. Egging, you have your skill, your technique, you understand of the colors of the jigs that create more effectiveness. For the sink rate and stuff to create more presentation and stuff, the technique itself to mimic the different bait, how they swim and all these things. So it becomes more technical and more skillful method. That's why you see that people using squid jig in egging method, they tend to outfish the traditional method of float fishing and stuff. But older generation tend to like to use the float method because they tend to like to relax and just sit back and put multiple rods, a lot of them, then just wait there, and that's the traditional method of fishing. So fishing has evolved as well. Back then, people just use bait, cast it out, or hand line, cast it out, and just sit for hours. It's a relaxing activity, so they just wait and stuff. But fishing has evolved so much that the technology and the skill that is involved has gone so much, from burleys and stuff. We're using burleys, all the scent on the soft plastic. We have soft plastic fishing, we have lure fishing. So it has evolved so much that egging is just another type of method that you actually need the skill to do it as well. So there's arging and stuff. So it's a skill that you want to pick up and the knowledge that you want to learn to master the technique, so that you can actually fish effectively and outfish people and outperform people on a pier. Especially on a pier when there's lots of people fishing, you want to make sure that you are the one catching and not them, because there's limited squid in the school, and because now it's alright, like for Victoria now they're having a postponing time, there's a lot of small squid around. A lot of people, the new people, everyone that just goes there. There's so many squid around, everyone is still catching. But when it comes to in a month or two, when the squid numbers has decreased because they tend to grow up more, and the small one a lot are eaten by fish or got fish by fishermen already. So that's when the time is much harder because you need to be fine-tuned to outfish people and outperform people. So it's important to know the technique, the jig color to suit the weather, and the sink rate to suit the water condition and all these things. So it's important to learn those. But for this method, the main thing is that you need to adjust the depth, and also the most important thing is to read the float. So once you read the float with subtle movement, because squid does not stay on this type of spike for long. Because why? This spike tends to be bigger, so they're constantly pulling, and this spike is stronger as well because they are having resistance. Because it's not like a drag. You can set loose drag because you want the float to have sensitivity to pull down. So you tend to set the drag very tight. So when they pull, you can feel it. So that when the squid pull, this spike is so strong, it's so big. When they rip out their own tentacle before you realize it. So if they leave it for too long, they're constantly darting backwards. What they do, they rip out their own tentacle. So because these hooks are too strong compared to what you have in a squid jig. Squid jig as well, as we set a looser drag. So when they pull, the drag is still pulling. It does not rip out the tentacle. So that is why you still need to focus on your float, to read the float, to be effectively to catch the squid. So this is not just a fully cast and prey method, but you still have to input what you can to improve your chances of catching the squid as well. So you can see people using the same thing next to you. They could have caught it, but they don't realize it. But you realize it and you hook it in. That's where you catch. So sometimes it's not that people's not catching. They already caught it, but they didn't realize it. They did not reel the squid. So it's important to understand all these aspects and what is applicable in whichever situation. Like I say, there's no right or wrong method, because there's online you can see a lot of forums that constantly arguing over which is the right method up, or like I say, there's no right or wrong method. To us, it's only which method is most suitable for which condition. So understanding the condition of the area will increase our effectiveness. So effectiveness is what our company focus on, and performance as well. So for us, we try to incorporate artistic design and color science to create more effectiveness on our squid jig as well as the technology, because we try to target what the squid see and how they behave as well. So it's important to understand bait presentation is to target their behavior. So because if you present it well, they see it as this is a easy food source, so they will attack it. So that's why fish as well, you need a bait presentation is very important. So if you don't present the bait well, a lot of times you've seen some people are catching fish after fish, but especially garfish, you can see that people that pulling a lot, it's not just about what they use or what burley and stuff. They could have used exactly the same thing. I could have used exactly the same float and bait as well next to my friend, and my friend is catching more than me. He's constantly pulling up and all these things. It's because his bait presentation, he's set, he knows the depth, he can judge the depth, because you have to remember, depth for us, to be master the skill of depth is very hard. It's not easy thing to do, because the water has distortion. We can see let's say we can see the squid swimming around. We might think it's a meter, but actually the depth is much deeper, so it's 2 meters. So always compensate for that, because the distortion, there's illusion. So we always tend to see the squid that we see on top of the water tend to be closer to us, but it's not. So you actually have to let your jig sink a bit deeper. So you see a lot of times people say, oh, I see the squid swimming right in front of me, but they don't seem to attack my jig. So you have to understand that you have to have the jig to sink down to where the level they are as well, so that they come check it out. Once they're there, if it's a small squid, use a slow sinking. A slow sinking, actually you just leave it there and tighten the line, it will actually just float there like that. So the squid will come check it out and they'll attack. That's why a lot of people say, oh, why do the small squid come and look at my jig and they dart off and stuff? So it's because that the more heavier jig or just a normal jig, they actually movement is too much, they will still spook them away. For a slow sinking jig, that's why in Australia it's not really used much with slow sinking, but if you want to master the skill, try to incorporate slow sinking jigs into your fishing. So our range, we all have a slow sinking model for all our jigs at the moment, but later on we'll cut down on, because we do not sell much of that, because not many people adopt to it, but our team loves to use our slow sinking jigs. So it's a slow selling thing in Australia, but at the moment we still offer all our jigs with a slow sinking model. So slow sinking is one key thing to fish as well. That's like I say in the afternoon as well. So that is why with this method, sometimes people will catch. Is because why? Because they are more subtle, because this method is just very subtle. They just leave it there and just dangling to them. There's not much movement, so the squid have time to come check it out and stuff and attack it. So float method is very subtle, so it will attract small to big squid as well. But the only thing is that you have to read the float, because the bait we put on it is much bigger than a squid jig. So a lot of times, at times they pull it from the side, your float is dragging from this way, so you have to strike. So you have to pull it strike to let it hook on. But at times when they all sell to it, they manage to touch a bit of the hook, they get panic, they duck backwards, and they get themselves hooked. So have to read your float as well. So float going sideways doesn't mean always there's squid, because you have to see the current as well. If the current is strong, it's floating like that, doesn't mean there's squid, because there's the current pushing and the wind. So you have to look at the weather. So if you want to fish effectively, you have to be observant of all the condition around. So I think that's what I can offer for you today on the float fishing and Paternoster rig as well. Paternoster rig, downside is a lot of snag, and the good side is you can cast very far, and the method is very subtle. So you can try that method as well. So it does work, but just that personally I just do not like to use it. It's just that too much snag. So, but from Wellington area, if you want to, if you're in Victoria, use this method there, you will fish a lot very fast. Or in Rye at the moment, Rye is all full of small squid at the moment, or the newly spawned. Try this method, you'll see that it's very effective. Okay, let's go through the questions. We've got a few questions. Let's have a look. So Nathan, I was talking about the Paternoster rig. You can use 2 squid jigs like hanging in between. So this method, you can ask your wife to try it and just lift it up and down. Don't cast it too far. Just cast it to about 2-3 meters in front and just do a simple lift. So this method works as well, but just bear in mind that you might get snagged. So at the bottom one, that's why I say at the bottom, this loop for the sinker, do not do it too hard, just do one loop. Let me see. Okay, yeah. For here, I'll just do a 1 loop or 2 loop, just like that. Just 1 circle, and just go through. You can go through once or go through twice. So if you want safer, you go through twice. So for this one, it's not very strong as well. So when you, in case it's snag, when you pull, and this knot will break off, or the sinker, the metal part will break this part off, and you still get your jig back. So this method, don't cast far, because if you cast far, you try to wind it in, you tend to get snagged, and you tend to have a chance of losing the whole rig from the swivel to the end. So, or you just, if you're lucky, you just have the sinker break off, and then you don't lose the jig. For this method, try to just cast 2 or 3 meters in front and just lift. Yeah, so but for now you can use it in Queen's Cliff because all the smaller squid are coming closer to the pier, so you do not need to have the cast far. So this method will work in Queen's Cliff at the moment as well. And regarding on the depth, so on the depth we can't really tell you how deep it is. So it's for those experts, they tend to be able to judge all the time. So that's why you see people outfish other people, because they can judge how deep the water is at the moment. So that's because the tide make a difference. So during high tide, low tide, and the outgoing tide, incoming tide. So when you're using bait, the jig, you also constantly have to see the tide time as well. So always check the tide. So it's the incoming tide. You have to constantly, the next hour, you have to maybe adjust a meter if it is a tide coming up. So you have to constantly adjusting as well. So that is one thing that you have to learn to master, the depth. So there's a lot of things that, there's other gadgets that start you cast it down to see how deep it is and stuff. So the main way is to try to look how deep from the front and judge it here. So this is one of the ways. So for depth is very important. If you can master the estimation of the depth, that's how you actually outfish people. So that's one thing. So for boat, it's much easier. Boat, you can just look at the sounder and you can just adjust the line. But for land-based, you have to go through visual, or you can just do a manual test to see how deep it is. Yeah, so this is a certain technique that I'll teach later on. Any more questions? I'll give it a couple of minutes to see if any more questions. We'll do a masterclass later on how to share my secret on how to actually master the depth of the water. So there will be a secret masterclass that I'll teach. It's actually my own technique on how to judge that. So it will help you in mastering to how you can compete with other people, because that one will work well in fishing as well as in squid fishing. So once you master that skill, you actually will outfish a lot of people, because a lot of time fish, same thing, you have to present the bait right in front of them for mackerel and stuff, and if smaller bait fish, you actually want to fish where the depth is. So if you get the depth wrong, if you're doing float fishing and stuff, you do not catch. So for float fishermen, they're actually very expert in understanding how the depth is. So we do different type of fishing, so we tend to know as well. Can you explain how the moon and the tide affect the squid? Tide, we don't see much effect, but for us personally, we like some movement in the water. So we tend to, because like for low tide, usually it tends to be more calm. So if you fish when it's fully low tide, it's a bit more calm. So the squid like a bit of a movement in the water. So when it's too calm, sometimes they do not attack. And the downside is that for shallow waters, when it's low tide, a lot of people struggle to fish, is because that the time of the jig to go down is too fast. Even in the 2.5 is sinking too fast, and they do a hop. Let's say normally the water is 5 meters, but when it's low tide, it can go down to 2 meters to a meter. So the jig is sinking too fast, the squid do not have a chance to attack, because they attack when it's on the drop. So if you're using a slow sinking jig, it was like that. It does not sink such a deep angle. It sinks more like that. So when it sinks like that, and it slowly come down, the squid have the opportunity to attack it. So tide is determined on how deep or depth of the water, and also the currents will also determine the jig size you want to use. For full moon, personally, there's a lot of concept around, like, oh, some people say, nah, it's not true. Some just say that, oh, because for us personally, we've seen that full moon is very hard to fish for Victoria waters, but for smaller squid, it does affect as well, because they go deeper. For like lollygo and stuff, they go deeper as well. So in other countries, they do research on that, why full moon, the squid or fish, they tend to do research on the fish and squid, tend to be harder to fish on the shore, on the land base, is because that they follow the movement of their bait. So when the moon is bright in the sea, the plankton, the phytoplankton, which is the plant-based plankton, will move towards deeper in the water. So you create the plankton and stuff that the plankton will follow, then the bait fish will follow. So I'll do a master class on that. Then actually will attract the fish and towards that way to the deeper waters. That's why full moon tend to be, the boat is fine, you can still fish deeper waters, you can still get squid. But for land based, it tends to be harder, because it's not that you can't catch, it's just that it's harder to catch because there's less squid coming too closer to the shore. More often they follow the bait, where the large to a bait fish towards the deeper sea. So that's a topic that I'll cover later on. There we've done some scientific research as well. Any more questions? We tend to come closer to the shore, partly a few reasons, because we have a lot of light pollution from our buildings and from our pier lights and everything. It's because the light pollution will create the start of a food chain. So that actually you have the plankton will start coming, the sea flies, and after that the bait fish, small bait fish, and the bigger bait fish, then it attract a food chain. So it create a food chain. So that is why the squid will start coming closer to the shore. Yeah. So that's why in overseas, the commercial boat, they tend to use, I was on a Malaysian commercial boat back then to fish for squid, and they pretty much use a generator to use a halogen light. So when they on a halogen light, then you see the squid start coming to schooling around the boat. It's because of the light source they create, not because the light they come towards the light, it's because the light create a food chain where they create the plankton and all this stuff to bait fish. So that's where they start coming and school around the area, and that's how they do it. So Nathan, you can try today. You can split the Paternoster rig style or the float style. The float style, actually your wife can just cast next to your, so you're casting this way, she can just cast the other way and just slowly wind it in. I just adjust the float to be much longer, but also allow to actually the float, let's say if it's let's say if the water is 3 meters, don't adjust 2.5 meters, actually adjust to 3 meters. The float to make it 3 meters the same depth of the water. It's because that when you're dragging in the angle, you already lose about half a meter of the line, so half a meter of the depth to compensate of the depth. If it's vertical and vertical, that's fine. It's 3 meters, you will touch the bottom 3 meters. But if it's an angle, a fishing angle, if it's 3 meters, you will still not touch the bottom. Yeah. So you can let the line to be 3.5 meters, still fine. So as long as you cast it out, let the float down, but you can set this stopper to about 3 meters. So once it's cast down, then you can just slowly wind the float in. So wind the float in, and you should actually catch as well. She might outfish you as well because you are attracting the squid towards your jig, but by the time you lift it up, the other jig is still in the water slowly swimming, and she might catch it, and she might end up catching more than you. Yeah. You can try Paternoster rig as well, just cast it out, not far, and just do simple lift. Paternoster rig, don't do egging stuff, just do like a lift. Slowly lift and let it go down, and just wait 10-20 seconds, even let the jig wait in the bottom, and just do another 1-2 lift, and just leave it there and let it go. Yeah, just remember for Paternoster rig, just slow lift. If you don't have a small sinker, just head to Kmart. Kmart does a pack of these small ones, really cheap. So just get one of that. So it's like $2 or $3. So just a pack of that, and that will do. And Kmart open too late, 11 o'clock. So pretty much you can just go and grab one of that, and pretty much cheap, and you don't mind losing it as well. So you don't have to go to tackle store. Tackle store will be more expensive. Just go to Kmart and you can get this sinker very cheap. That's this one. And also for Tsuriou, they're cheap in Kmart as well. You don't need to, for this method, you don't need to use fancy, expensive stuff. So just the cheap stuff will do. Yeah, we do have float that actually light up. This floats light up as well, but it does not have a sensor. But the sensor float we used before, when the water is calm, that's fine. So when the squid touch and the fish touch, you will see the light turn from green to red. But the downside is once the change of tide or there's a current and the water is bobbing up and down the wave, then the sensor just go haywire. So end up you become more confused because you constantly going red and you constantly think that it's squid. End up you keep constantly winding in your line. End up you actually affect the depth the thing itself, and also you end up winding your line too much that you actually come too close. That it's not actually the weed patch anymore. It's not in the strike zone. So that is one thing that you need to consider as well, those sensor float. So it's not very effective in certain conditions. So that's why it's important to understand effective based on the condition of the day. So it's very effective when it's very calm. So when the float doesn't move, there's no wave around. So once you move, you can see the sensor turn red. But if it's wave constantly bobbing up and down, then you actually, it's hard to actually know that which one is actually the correct being struck by the squid, because they're constantly going green and red, green and red, green and red. So that's one thing to consider as well. For float fishing, it's very important to fish with visual. So for visual cues. So next in the future we'll do showcase as well how to fish for garfish and mackerel and stuff. The smaller the fish is, the harder it is to catch for us, because for float method. So if you want to outfish people, because a lot of people you use cast and pray, so you cast it out and you just hope that the squid, the fish, let's say for garfish, For garfish, we use a float that is very sensitive. So once we see that it goes down a bit, we strike the fish. We do not let the fish, because a lot of people tend to cast it out and just leave your bait there. So when the garfish, they're hoping the garfish that's very strong and that they pull the float down, that they notice it. For us, it's not. For us, we can see from this we can censor how the fish touch or how the squid touch. A little touch, the whole thing will from one beat. These are actually a sensor. So you see this one, every centimeter, this is actually an indicator. So you actually would want to adjust the float to come to the, let's say, to the green light. So for garfish, because for mackerel it's fine, because when the mackerel strike, we can see that it goes down 1 or 2. So it's very obvious. But for garfish, we can see from a little bit, we just go down a tiny bit, we already know that they're touching the bait, we strike it. So if you strike the fish, you actually end up your hook rate is much higher and your catch rate is much higher. So for float fishing, it's about striking. So it's like lure fishing. So you feel the touch, you strike. That's why in advanced squid technique that I taught 2 classes before, once you feel the touch, you strike the squid. So striking method is actually a technique that you need to master as well. So understanding the strike, then actually you can increase your catch rate as well. But strike, like I say, smaller squid strike, you might actually have to be careful as well, because you might rip the tentacle off. So it's actually a balance to understand where the squid are touching and how the squid are touching as well. So if they're touching from this side, so you can strike it because they're grabbing you with more part of the body, more part of the tentacle. But if they're grabbing from the head and you strike it too hard, you just pretty much rip the tentacle off. So striking and reading the float is very important. So it actually goes hand in hand. If you want to do float fishing effectively, you see people using the ISO long rod to catch for bream. I have friends that is master in those techniques, and pretty much you can see them they pull one after the other. It's not because that the fish bite and then they just pull it up. They actually have a technique. How they present their bait, the bait itself, the burleys attract them, and also the most important thing is to strike them. Because for bream, they're very sensitive. So once you see any movement, they run away, they spook. As you know, if you lure fishing for bream, all the competition and stuff, you know that you need to, once you feel the touch, it's less than 0.03 seconds, you have to quickly strike already. So once you feel the vibration, you strike. So same thing as float fishing, you see a little bit of vibration, you strike. So even for garfish, you strike the garfish, that's why we tend to catch more compared to what other people just waiting for a good bite by the gar, they pull the float down before they strike. So for us, effective is in a short period of time, you can catch volume of squid, and also effectively because you constantly focusing on different techniques. That's why we don't. So sometimes it can be very tiring because we fish for focus. So we have a technique in our brain constantly have to be focused on like counting how the jig is sinking, how long the jig is sinking, and everything. So it become a technique, and you actually fish with a purpose. So when you fish with a purpose, you know how to target the squid more effectively. So if you're just casting and prey more traditional way where you want a more relaxed way, then you prefer to be using this type of float method. You cast out, have a beer, chill, chat with your friends, and when you see the float go down, you catch. But that's if you want to relax. But if you want to catch effectively, that's why we're spending more and more on more expensive rod is because the more expensive the rod is, the more sensitive it is. So that what you require you to use more skill to constantly to read all these things that you can increase your catch rate. So it's more expensive rod and cheap rod is not much difference, just that they give you the extra part that you can use more technique and to understand the feel of the squid touch and all this kind of stuff that's more sensitive. So as you go on, it's depending how you want to fish. For us, we want to fish effectively, so with technical and skill and knowledge and understanding of the environment. So that's why we tend to start to research more and more and learn more and more. That's why when you start to do that, you actually will improve your skill better and better. So because after you come back, you say, oh, okay, today it didn't go well. For us as well, we don't back out every single time because this is part of fishing. You don't catch every single time. So when we come back in a bad day, we try to analyze what goes right and what goes wrong. Okay, maybe today we go there, the weather might be good, but the current is horrible. So the tide, coming tide, everything looks good, but the swell was pretty big. So that might affect the day of the fishing. So a lot of things you have to analyze, what went right and what went wrong. So even those a lot of professional fishermen, they actually do a log as well, like which day, which month they went there, and which spot is good, and this year was good, but next year was bad, why, and stuff. They'll try to analyze it as part of the research. So for us as well, we fish in certain spot, you can see the progressively change in the environment as well. That's why sometimes we do not share some of the spots. It's because that it's not because of people being selfish or anything, but it's actually certain sport. If you're constantly having too many people casting and ripping out all the seabait, so we have seen the progressive decline in one of the sport that my friend ended up sharing to the public. So then that spot become totally swamped by people, and become not only that we want a spot that's quiet for us to fish, but it's gone, but also that there's overfishing. So the weeds, because a lot of people that is new to squid fishing, they cast it out, they do not know what they're doing, the squid jig come all the way, they're just constantly ripping out all the squid jig. If you're having like 50, 60 people constantly ripping out the squid habitat, what happened? There's no habitat for them to breed and stuff, so the area will decline squid. It will not wipe out the squid, but it just decline the squid. So because squid tend to go back to where they were born, so that is why they will decline. So it's important to sometimes that certain spot we do not share is because that we want squid to have an opportunity to breed, the breeding ground. That's why like Flinders in Victoria, that spot is famous for big squid, and that's where all the breeding female goes there. But a lot of people know that that is an expert spot. A lot of new people goes there, but that spot is very hard because there's not seaweed, it's kelp, so a lot of people are losing a lot of jigs. So because it's kelp, the habitat can't be destroyed easily, because you can see that it's a graveyard of squid jig. A lot of divers goes there and pick up lots and lots of squid jig. That spot requires a very technical way of fishing. So a lot of new people that actually seem enticed to go to fish there because there's a big squid, so they end up losing a lot of jigs. But that spot, the habitat is still pristine, is because that it's kelp, not weed, so that it does not constantly being ripped out. People tend to rip out their jig, lost their jig there, instead of ripping out the area. A certain area with actually more softer weed in Victoria, that's actually more important to sometimes that we do not share the spot, is because it's dangerous, because some spot we fish is actually you have to scale the cliff, and two, we want a spot that actually when we have time we want to go there and relax and have a spot to fish, and three, it's not because we want to selfish, but sometimes we want to preserve the pristine of the area so that the squid is not overfished and the area is pristine for the squid to have the chance to grow as well. So that is why. Any more questions? Paternoster, there's a lot of ways to do the loop, so just go online to loop. We also got a fancy one that we use for snapper that we actually very long and it's actually curved. So those are a lot of different methods to tie this, so it's just up to you. But just don't do the loop too big, because if it's too big, just remember that's enough for you your squid jig to be a loop into, because you need to be long enough for you to put the squid jig over it. So, but if not too long as well, because too long you will get dangled down this way, so end up that you just be dangled down. So we want it short, because as the shorter it is, so it tend to hold the tension more, so it tend to have an angle. So you tend to want to have it in a shorter loop, not too big loop, but not short enough that we have also experienced back then. It's like we do it too short and the knot is too big that it does not go through here and we can't go loop through it, and we have to redo it. So that is why don't do too big of a loop, and the knot is good enough that it can go through. If it's too small a loop, hopefully the knot can still go through the ring and the jig, that you can loop it around the squid jig to tie it up like that. Yeah. So this is a thing that the key as well. Don't do it too tight. For Paternoster, you can use the braided line with a leader line as your Paternoster. But for float, remember monofilament line is crucial, because we have experience before using braided line. Because it just do not slide, especially if you're using this type of sliding float. Because in this type of float, you need to have time to, because it's going in L shape, so you need time for it to slide back up while the bait drop down. So if for braid, it's too soft and once it's wet, it does not have a smooth surface to slide. It does not work. Because for us, we don't use monofilament much nowadays because we tend to use braid. Braid you can use for fishing as well as for squidding. But for one thing we do is that we use this for float fishing. Whenever we use float fishing for fish or for squid, we have to use monofilament. So for monofilament, you can just use cheap reel because a cheap reel and a cheap line is fine because you don't really need to look at the sensitivity and stuff as long as it balances the weight of can hold the weight of the jig, the spike, and the bait, as well as the float as well to slide through. And as well as when you cast it out, you do not break the line. That's the most important thing. So you need to be strong enough and also sensitive enough that you can see when it pulls down, the float will still goes down. So don't go use like too heavy pound, like 50 pounds, 60 pounds. No, don't use a snapper rod. Snapper rod line that's too strong. So just use probably like 20 pounds, 15 pounds. That's fine. So you don't have to go too hardcore on that as well. Because if you go too high, you pretty much, as you know, the stronger the line, the less sensitive it is. So the lighter the line, the more sensitive it is, and you can cast further as well. But the stronger the line, the less breakage. The lighter the line, the more sensitive, but easy to break as well. So this is the thing that you have to balance up. So it's up. It's a pretty much a balancing game. So you have to balance for float fishing. So the understanding of that is important as well. Any more questions? We give it a minute or two. If there's no more question, I think that's it for me. If you have any squid fishing topics that you want me to cover first, and I will let me know, then I'll put it in front to do a masterclass first on that. So we'll be doing our filming for proper masterclass in YouTube soon. So we're already in the planning stage. Pretty much we already organized with the videographer and stuff. So we are in the process of starting that. So once we have that, we have more proper masterclass where all the information you can see is more easily and will be more informative with videos from what we recorded and all these things. So this will be much better compared to what we're having now. And also Facebook live stream is having a new rules from Facebook. So our live stream will only last for 30 days. Once 30 days, we no longer can put it like unlimited, leave it forever. So once 30 days, it will be deleted. So if you haven't watched it, do go back to watch our old masterclass. We'll try to find time to download it down to try to make it into a video to put it permanently on our Facebook, but we might not be able to get it all in time. So just try to go watch back in the old one that you want. Okay, for John's questions, so what do the squid eat? So the squid tend to feed on the main source of food source is because they hang around the weed base. So what type of bottom feeders they go for? So a lot are whiting, grass whiting, King George whiting, those are the main one. Then the mid water fish that you can use is like Tommy Rap, mackerel, yellowtail, those kind of things. You also do not want to use bait that is too big as well. Like I say, when its bait presents too big, the squid might get spooked. So depending on where you're fishing with the spiked squid, for Queen's Cliff, Flinders, those areas, you can use a big fish as well. That's fine because they tend to have bigger squid around during when there's peak breeding season. So then they don't get spooked and they're more aggressive. So they'll come and grab it, and the big one they'll just attack it because they want to breed and eat. So for bigger bait, they'll think that okay, it's an easy meal, and this one looks like it's a dead fish and it's already an easy meal. So they come and attack it and just eat it. So but if it's a more area with a smaller fish, you want to use like a smaller bait, such as like Tommy Rap, grass whiting and stuff. So grass whiting is good because grass whiting is not that big, and that is one of the main food source that they go after because it's grass whiting is pretty much bottom feeders and it's around the weed bait. So that's one thing that they always tend to attack as well. So for let's say for Flinders, for us when we go Flinders, if you want to use this method, we tend to bring some earthworm, and we catch some grass whiting, and then we put it fresh, you see the area that you're fishing, they tend to have the food source that the squid have. So you can actually catch the bait itself before you use it to catch the squid. Yeah. You see a lot of squid area, you tend to have like a lot of Tommy Rap as well. So and mackerel. So these are the areas, these are the food source they all tend to go for. So you can pretty much catch those easily and just use those. Any more questions? So bait, pretty much you can just see what is around the area and what they feed on. So then you just pretty much just can use what is similar to the area. But for Queensland it might be different because they are more tropical water, so the squid might feed on different type of bait fish. So you can target more of the species of smaller fish that they feed on in that area. So it's just depending on which state you're in and what area you fish. Yeah. Like then they'll say, like Western Australia, they have butterfish, trumpeter, and mollies and stuff, so they can use that as well. Yeah. All right. Any questions on the float or Paternoster rig? I think that's it. So next week I will be covering probably how to read the wind as well as the water conditions. So this is something that one of the members contacted us that asked us to cover, so we'll cover that topic. So next week we'll cover that topic for everyone. So I think that's it for today. Thank you everyone. I'll see you again next week. So in case you haven't shopped with us before, you feel free to use try10 to get 10% off our Squid Jig discount on our website. Go check our website out, and there's a lot of learn section. There you'll see a lot of the color charts and everything, like our color signs and everything that you can learn from there, and we have right up there as well. So I think that's it for today. Catch you later next week. Ciao.